Dirty Birds, what's up? And welcome to another edition of Falcons Final Whistle presented by Zaxby's. I am your host, Will McFadden. I am joined by Amna Subhan and Taylor Vismor. We are here to break down the Atlanta Falcons' 42-21 loss on the road to the Minnesota Vikings, which drops them to 6-7 on the season. And more importantly, after Tampa Bay's victory against the Las Vegas Raiders, the Falcons are now in second place in the NFC South. And Taylor, if you had told me a month ago after that Dallas game, hey, here's how the next 4 games are going to go and here's where the Falcons are going to be, I would not have really known how they would get there, but here we are.
Yeah, here we are. I think, it was interesting coming into this season and talking to all these players, coaches, what have you. A lot of the players were saying, this roster from the top to the bottom is the best one I've ever been a part of. That includes a Grady Jarrett who's been to a Super Bowl before. Mm-hmm. And there was so much excitement about this team. I'm not saying that's gone, but I don't think if you would have told those guys saying that this is the best roster from top to bottom, this is where they would be now, I don't know that they would believe you. And yeah, I mean, it's been a hard 4 games, a hard 5 weeks. And it does, make you scratch your head and wonder, where do you go from here if you're Raheem Morris and the rest of this team?
Yeah, especially when looking at this game, it could have been a game where Kirk Cousins and the Falcons got their mojo back. You're on a losing streak. The storylines are mounting. Kirk Cousins returns to Minnesota, where he spent the last 6 seasons, and you had a chance to kind of switch and shift the narrative a little bit heading down to the rest of the season. But instead, here you are at 6-7. You find the Bucs on top of you, and you're trying to reset again.
Yeah, and I think that the Falcons have shown improvement in some key areas, but they just really haven't put a full game together. And that's kind of when we were previewing this show on Friday, I said I think they need to win the first quarter and the fourth quarter. They won that first quarter. They got off to a beautiful opening drive. Yeah. Their first defensive series, back-to-back sacks, get off the field. I mean, you could not have scripted a better start on the road in one of the most hostile environments. And yet it's that consistency piece. It's playing the full game and it's finishing things off. And I mean, the Vikings dominated the fourth quarter. There's kind of no other way to put it.
It was 21-21 when that thing started.
Exactly. And then they go on a 21-0 run, right? Helped in part by some of the issues that have been plaguing Atlanta over these last 4 losses. Kirk has another interception in there. I think Ray McLeod's fumble, not saying that that's been an issue for him this season, but I think that was the turning point in this game because at that point, it's a shootout. Like you said, it was 21-21. At that moment, the Vikings had just scored. Atlanta has a chance to kind of get back into it and answer and kind of take the lead there again, but they couldn't do it. And a key example of the way that the Falcons improve in some areas but just aren't able to maintain that level of play in others was the pass rush in the secondary. This was the second game in a row when Atlanta had at least 4 sacks, right? They had 4 sacks today. They had 5 sacks last week. Back-to-back games, we wanted to see them do that. They did it. And unfortunately, a secondary that has played really well couldn't hold up on the back end. I do think those are tied together a little bit. But Taylor, I'm curious, seeing the approach that they had today, which was a little more blitz heavy, which was let's go attack Sam Darnold and we're going to trust our guys on the back end. That didn't work out, unfortunately. Would you have liked to see them play a little more zone heavy, put that roof over top, or did you like the aggressive approach that they ultimately came out with?
Yeah, I think it's like an impossible question to answer, right? Because if the Falcons had one and this defense had done really well, then you'd be like, this is the best defensive scheme that the Falcons have played all season. But if they did this opposite scheme and they did play, they didn't blitz as much and then they ended up losing, then you would be asking me the same question, right? So I think it's been refreshing to see this pass rush kind of come to life later in this season. Yeah, albeit it's been 9 sacks in the last 2 weeks, and it's been awesome to have the 5 sacks. And then the next week you got 4. AK comes to mind. He's had, a tear of 2 weeks, 3 sacks in 2 weeks. It's been really awesome to see him kind of get his flowers a little bit. But what you're also seeing is the secondary going up against arguably one of the best wide receiver duos in this league, right?
Yeah,
and you have Justin Jefferson, who is one of, if not the best wide receiver in the league, and then Jordan Addison, who is learning from the best. And so you know that they're going to get theirs, and they're going to get those receptions, and they're going to get those completions, what have you. And Jesse Bates spoke about it in his press conference this week, saying we just have to limit the yards after catch. But it really wasn't the yards after catch. It was that they were kind of getting off timing. It seemed like the secondary was getting off time with those wide receivers and letting him get so much space downfield. Raheem Morris said in his post-game press conference that this secondary felt like it was a lack of discipline in technique and in body control. And I think you saw that today with the secondary, specifically the cornerbacks.
Yeah, for sure. The body control part, I think, is a key thing. I mean, both of those long touchdowns, right? Jordan Addison at first, it looks like the ball's underthrown a little bit. He makes the adjustment. I don't know if Mike Hughes tracked that ball as well as certainly Addison did, and he kind of runs off the screen. There's an easy walk-in touchdown. Justin Jefferson, it looks like D. Alford gets a little confused in what the coverage is there, or maybe the safety up over top. Like, don't want to put it on one player because I don't know exactly what the play call was, but there was a breakdown. Justin Jefferson walks into the end zone. It was too easy at times for an Atlanta secondary that, again, has not made life easy on opposing receivers. I mean, they're coming off of a half in which they shut down Ladd McConkey after making an adjustment at halftime against the Chargers. So we know that this group is capable and has it in them. I kind of think, Amna, that the approach had more to do with not allowing such great players to get as far downfield to let Sam Darnold, cook like he did on these deep shots, because dropbacks of over 2.5 seconds completed 16 of his 21 pass attempts for 292 yards and 4 touchdowns. I think the Falcons said, hey, we're not going to give him that time. We're going to get to him before that 2.5 second window runs out. And you saw a moment where Justin Simmons kind of is coming, has a chance to get him down. Sam Darnold escapes, and it results in one of those touchdowns to Justin Jefferson that we were just talking about. Are you worried about Atlanta's secondary at all over these final 4 games, or do you think we'll look back on this as an outlier where the Vikings are just a great offensive team?
Yeah, it feels a little bit more like an outlier because this secondary they pride themselves on limiting explosive plays, and obviously they did not do that today. So I don't know that it's something that you really concern yourself with because Justin Jefferson is just that great. Like, he already has more than 1,000 yards this season. He's done that in each of his last seasons since he's been in the league. But I kind of look at it where if you're going to let that guy beat you, let that guy beat you. Don't let Jordan Addison take off. Like, he has, if I'm averaging this correctly, about like 57 yards a game. Like, he doubled that. He had 4 touchdowns on the season. You let him have 3. Like, you don't want 2 guys to explode in the way that they did because you're never going to, it's going to be very tough to win that way.
And I don't know that all hope is lost for the secondary. I totally agree with you that this is an outlier because, while this secondary gave away a lot of points, I mean, someone's name that did not come up hardly at all in this whole broadcast and all 4 quarters was A.J. Terrell. And that's because the cornerback position, like, at a granular sense, it's a thankless job unless there's an interception and a pass breakup. I think A.J. Terrell had a fabulous game today. I thought he played a really solid full 4 quarters. And obviously, it's not just him in that secondary, but I don't know that all hope is lost. I think when you have leaders like an A.J. Terrell, when you have leaders like a Jesse Bates, even a D. Alford a little bit as a leader, you have these guys that can get up, brush themselves off and say, next play, let's get up, let's defend every blade of grass. And I think when you have someone like AJ that had a great game today, I don't want to lose sight of what Terrell was able to do. No,
I'm very glad that you brought up AJ because this is an Amna. You wrote about this on the website in the week leading up to the game. It was the 3rd time AJ and Justin Jefferson have gone up against each other. One was in college, one was their rookie season, and this was by far the best performance that AJ has had against Justin Jefferson. And I saw a stat from Next Gen Stats after the game. AJ was lined up on Justin Jefferson on 18 routes that he ran. He gave up 1 completion for 7 yards. I mean, this is against a receiver who came into the game 2nd in receiving yards, has torched like any defense, is capable of doing that against anybody. And AJ shuts him down when he's on him. I mean, as you said, Taylor, you're looking at maybe silver linings for a group that has played well by and large all season long. That's a prime one right there. Yes, Atlanta, across from AJ Terrell, they'd probably like to see a little bit higher level of play. But you also could point to times when Mike Hughes has made plays, times when Clark Phillips has made plays. I do think I lean a little bit towards hey, the Vikings are really good, right? I mean, I saw Sam Darnold had 163 passing yards on deep attempts, which are 20 plus yards downfield. He was 4 of 6 with 2 touchdowns. That's insane. And I think 2 of those were a little bit of breakdowns, more on the back end than just getting totally beat. So we will hope that Atlanta's secondary can kind of get things turned around and the pass rush continues to build on 9 sacks in 2 games. I mean, it feels like they had like 9 sacks in 9 games for the first 9 weeks.
Well, they did. They had 10 going into last one, and then they were able to get half that total and then just build up on it.
It's such a turnaround. Whatever they did during the bye week.
I don't know what they did.
It's
but
crazy.
I would like to know.
It's working. Something that also we would like to see get turned around in the right direction is the performance of Kirk Cousins. We were hoping that the bye week would also get the offense back on track. That hasn't happened. There are things to like about Atlanta's offense. I think Bijan Robinson the last couple of weeks has played the way that you would hope he would play. Darnell Mooney had another big explosive play today. Ray McLeod is getting involved. But this was another game for Kirk when he has no touchdowns. It's 4 straight games, longest streak of his career. He has multiple interceptions. Once again, finishes with 344 yards. Crucially, afterwards, Raheem Morris, when asked about it, said Kirk Cousins is our quarterback. Taylor, what are your thoughts on, for the time being, Kirk Cousins remains starter?
Yeah, I mean, Kirk Cousins, after Raheem Morris came to the podium, Kirk obviously did as well, and he said that he felt more like himself today than he did against the Chargers. I mean, he said kind of jokingly the Chargers game was a very low bar for him to exceed, and obviously he exceeded the Chargers' expectations a little bit from last week. But I think personally watching this game, really that first half, I thought it was a really well-called game. I thought there was a lot of versatility. Greg Olsen kind of called it out as well and said, this is what this Falcons team does really well. Everyone always talks about this offense, right? And all the weapons that they have and all the ability that they have to, do different personnel. And I think when Zach Robinson and this offensive staff calls a bunch of different personnel, a bunch of different routes and different people catching different, I think when you can get as much involved as you can for that offense, you see them shine. That's really what really happened in the first half today. I mean, they had 21 personnel at one point. I was so excited about that. Mm-hmm. And I think when Zach Robinson can kind of get in there and kind of get in the nitty gritty of it and choose to do these really versatile options as an offensive play caller, you see Kirk Cousins kind of find his confidence again of okay, we're taking these wild shots. We're doing this wild little personnel that we don't do too often. And even at the half, he was 12 for 19. He had 183 yards at the half, which isn't, jumping off the page, but it's way better than he had against the Chargers. And I think, that's something to build off of. So I think if you're Raheem Morris, it's not the way that you wanted the game to end. Yeah, you had a couple turnovers. You had 3 turnovers, 2 interceptions, but this is something to build off of. Now, do I think that the last 4 weeks are something to build off of points in the season? I don't know, but I'm not the one making that call. I'm not the one that gets paid to make that call. And Raheem Morris obviously feels a certain type of way of saying, no, Kirk, we brought him in to take us to the playoffs, and we're going to stick by him. And I think what's important now is not just for Raheem Morris and the staff to stand by Kirk, but everyone in the locker room, everyone on the offense to stand by Kirk as well.
Yeah, and players afterwards, speaking with Taron Walk, Torrey McElhaney, who were in Minnesota and spoke with players after the locker room, voiced their support for Kirk. They stand behind Kirk. They say, they believe in him and that he gives them a chance to win. But this stat, Amna, is one that stood out to me as a little bit indicative of how the offense, yes, can do what they can do to help support Kirk. And they came in today really intent, I think, on running the ball. You saw them be effective with that early on. I thought the play calling design was creative. Again, I can still kind of do without some of the wide receiver screens that seem to crop up a few times a game, but that's only because they're not working. If they were working, I would love them, right? So this stat though, Amna, Kirk has thrown 4 interceptions without a touchdown pass on passes from a clean pocket since week 10. Before that, weeks 1 through 9, he had 14 touchdown passes and just 1 interception from a clean pocket. So this is not like he's under duress. It's not like they're, blitzing him more often or things are happening. He's just kind of making some of these mistakes, right? And that's where I think it's so head scratching. But if you are Raheem Morris, I understand the impulse to stand behind a player who for 12 other seasons has shown that he can do this at a very high level. And so you want to stick with him, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that just goes to what they've said since they signed Kirk, since they drafted Michael Penix Jr. Kirk is the guy. Michael is the future. I don't see them switching that up anytime soon. I don't think anyone really saw this stretch happen. But
yeah,
that's what they're saying. That's what they have always, that was the plan, and they're sticking to it.
I thought that he was talking about something different. He was talking specifically about like kind of the Falcons' fourth down plan today. But Greg Olsen said, if you have conviction, you have to have conviction.
Mm-hmm.
That conviction means that you stick with something even when it doesn't necessarily work, right? And so if the plan was always, Kirk, you're our starter, you have the experience, you have been to the postseason, you have won these big games, you're our guy to get us there, then yeah, the point of conviction is that you stand behind that even through the very tough times. But the key and really difficult thing in the NFL is learning at what point does that conviction start to get you in trouble, right?
Yeah.
And that can happen internally, that can happen externally. Usually it happens externally before it happens internally,
right.
But both can happen. And that is the real fine line that an organization has to walk, especially with something as delicate as the quarterback position. Today's episode of Falcons Final Whistle is brought to you by Zaxby's. And after a long game, when I'm tired and I need to refuel, I turn to Zaxby's. Their marinated, hand-breaded, fried to perfection chicken fingers, they hit the spot every time. Get yours with seasoned crinkle fries, a nice drink, and whichever of their 12 signature sauces you're feeling at the moment. But it always hits just right. So next time you need to refuel, go get yourself some Zaxby's. One other thing that kind of stood out today is the penalties, right? Especially some of the holding penalties. I think the Contavious Street penalty on that field goal was another key moment in this game where the Vikings, instead of coming away with field goal, go in and punch the ball in, and it's a touchdown. But you had a holding penalty on Drew Dahlman, which prevented a Bijan Robinson run down to the 3-yard line. The Falcons ultimately come away with a field goal on that possession. So Amna, again, penalties were kind of a defining element for the offense. Where does that rank for you in kind of when we're looking at what is setting Atlanta back, where does that fall?
Well, quite literally setting them back, right? I think it's a concerning trend, and we've talked about it all season, and I feel like they've found bits and moments where they have been able to clean it up a little bit, but then something else will kind of bite them. Raheem Morris, off the top in his opening statement, talked about self-inflicted wounds. And he said that was something they were really looking at in the bye week, and they were self-scouting that. And this is something that's plagued them all season. So the fact that we're in week 14 and you're still coming up with those penalties and letting them really spiral, like you talked about that Contavious Street one, that came off of Chris Lindstrom had the first penalty of the game. It was a holding call. They punt. Then Mike Hughes had that defensive pass interference penalty that gets them down the field 47 yards.
Yep.
There's a whole thing where it was like, oh, was there a fumble? Was there not? And then it's like, okay, they've held them to a field goal. Nope. Yep. Get the touchdown.
Penalty, touchdown.
So
yep.
you see it spiraling a little bit, and that's not what you want in week 14.
Yeah, penalties negate the good plays that the Falcons were making today, and then they kind of compounded some of the bad plays, right? And that is the tough spot to be in. But Taylor, there were also some problems in the red zone. So the Falcons were 2 of 5 in the red zone. One of those was the final drive of the game. So, I mean, realistically 2 of 4 when the game was in the balance, right? But to get down there, again, Bijan could have gotten them to the 3-yard line. There's a penalty. It sets you back. You come away with a field goal. I think the missing element of that passing game, of that real dynamic, confident Kirk Cousins dicing up zone defenses, like he had one throw today, I was like, boom, that's what it looks like. Yeah. It was to Ray right over the middle. And unfortunately, we're just not seeing that in the red zone. Which of those two, penalties or red zone, like over the final 4 games, are you more concerned about?
Red zone. I mean, quick, just easy question for you. How do you win a game?
Yeah, you got to score points.
You outscore the opponent, and you can't outscore an opponent if you can't score in the red zone. And I think it's been one of the bigger issues as of late for this Falcons team. Obviously, today they were 40% in the red zone, and then the last, 30% overall in the red zone after today. As a whole for this season. That's 30th in the league right now. Of course, we're recording this before the 4:05 games are over and before Sunday night, Monday night games are over. So that could kind of change the 30th place in the league, if you will. But from week 7 to week 9, first place in the red zone, 100%. 7 through 10, 4th place in the red zone, 77.8%. And so, yeah, I think when you look at the win column and you look at the loss column, the red zone efficiency, it's going to be in the red when you're losing. It's going to be in the green when you're winning. And I think that is how you win games. And I think, yeah, Raheem Morris said it last week, you can't turn the ball over 4 times and expect to win. He said it this week, you can't have self-inflicted wounds and expect to win. I think you can't not score in the red zone and expect to win. So I think moving forward, like that is, I think I would rather, they gave up 127 yards in terms of penalties today, but they also weren't scoring in the red zone. So I think you can kind of get away with the penalties a little bit more. You can't get away with not scoring in the red zone.
No, that's absolutely true. I mean, kudos to Younghoe Koo, again, was perfect today.
Yeah.
Like, I want to shout him out after the struggles, but yeah, he's been on the field way too much.
Yeah.
Like, you got to come away with touchdowns, and it would be just so nice for the Falcons to kind of get some more touchdowns in the fashion that the Vikings were getting their touchdowns today. What happened to Darnell Mooney 45-yard touchdown, right? What happened against Tampa, right? We were at, Tori slacked me early in this game being like, hey, when was the last time Atlanta scored an opening drive touchdown?
Yeah.
It was Kyle Pitts, 38 yards against Tampa Bay. Where is that?
Okay,
right?
but you can't blame it all on this Falcons offense. Like, Brian Flores has one of the best defenses in the league right now,
true.
and like they showed up today, and that's just how the NFL rolls.
But
I think Brian Flores has such a great defense. So.
He does. I just thought Atlanta early on was up to that challenge, right?
It felt like it.
One of the first plays to Darnell Mooney, they brought that zero pressure, right? They were right there in the A-gaps. I thought Bijan did a beautiful job stepping up, boom, clocking the pass rusher, buying Kirk time, and they ultimately go down and score a touchdown on that opening drive. That was an example of, I thought Atlanta was up for this game. I thought they were ready. It really, truly was just kind of the mistakes that this team made.
Yeah. All the credit to Brian Flores, but this has been a trend. Like, this red zone thing, you mentioned it, like the last few weeks, and it's just like, when are they going to start to become themselves again? They found something. They found who they were trying to become and where they wanted to be peaking at this point of the season. They did it early. How do you get back to that?
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And so the fact of the matter is that the Falcons are 6-7. Tampa Bay, after beating the Raiders, they're 7-6, right? So you had seen your lead in the South shrinking. It is now gone, right? So let's take a look at the final 4 games for both of these teams. Tampa Bay has 2 road games. Up next, they are at the Los Angeles Chargers. That's going to be a tough game for them. They are at the Dallas Cowboys. That could be a tough game. Neither team has, as Taylor mentioned, we're recording this, the late window has not wrapped up yet, but the Chargers are playing Sunday Night Football. The Cowboys are on Monday Night Football. So we don't know how those 2 teams have fared yet. Then they get the Carolina Panthers at home, who gave the Eagles a pretty tough game today.
They gave the Bucs a pretty hard time last time.
they've been playing pretty well recently. And then they've got the New Orleans Saints, who just continue to win in the most like crazy special teams mistakes by other teams. Yeah, the Rizzler, he's going hard down there in New Orleans. So that's what Tampa Bay has left. Atlanta has a road game against the Las Vegas Raiders up next on Monday Night Football. Then they are back home for the New York Giants. They are at Washington for a matchup with the Commanders. And then they are back home against those frisky Carolina Panthers. So I really just kind of looking at that, Taylor, I feel like how Tampa Bay performs the next 2 weeks, right? Because those could theoretically be 2 losses. I mean, any of these could be losses, but the Chargers and the Cowboys, those are tough matchups. If the Falcons can handle their business against the Raiders and the Giants, which at this point on paper, I like their chances to do that, you could be looking at that Washington game as, hey, if Atlanta can overcome this hurdle, then maybe they do control their destiny into the playoffs against Carolina in that season finale. Is that the way that you're seeing this, looking at it, or do you think this is just going to be a dogfight every single game the rest of the way?
I mean, I think it's going to be a dogfight, and I think what Tori wrote this week in one of her articles, I can't remember like what the title of it was called.
She writes a ton of articles.
She writes so many of them; they're so good. But something about to the effect of you don't want to put your playoff destiny in the hands of other people, and I think when you lose 4 in a row in 5 weeks, you do that. And I think, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have an easier slate of games. Yeah, they have the Chargers and the Cowboys, but the Falcons beat the Cowboys handsomely. And the Atlanta Falcons, they're home, they're away and home and away and a home and playing back-to-back away games. I mean, we saw it 3 weeks ago. Like what happened 3 weeks ago when the Falcons were back-to-back away games. So I do think this is going to be a dogfight and a scrappy fight to the end, which is not, of course, how the Falcons wanted this to be. But now you're a game back and you've got to get to either tie it again or above. And that's a lot of work on the field. And that's a lot of work of hoping that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers drop the ball.
Yeah. No, it's not just that. Yeah, exactly. I'm going to start over. Exactly. They don't control their destiny anymore. And that was the whole thing. They were outrunning the South. They were undefeated in the division for a while. You dropped that one against the Saints. But now here you are, and you're hoping that the Bucs lose.
Yeah.
Not just that you're controlling what you can control. You're focusing on yourself. You're trying to win games. But now you're looking at the scoreboard, all the NFL
scoreboard watching.
You're going to the locker room after the game when you're watching the TV.
Yeah. And that's not what they tried to do when they said, we're going to take over the South.
Right.
And here we are.
No, absolutely. I mean, last week, as we were recording this very podcast after the home game, we had the Panthers-Bucks game right up there on the TV. That was the first time we'd ever done that because it's been always just about the Falcons and handling their business. And unfortunately, it no longer is.
Yeah.
And they still have that tiebreaker, which is huge. But it's like you did all that work, you got that tiebreaker, but you let it slip through your fingers.
It doesn't matter if you don't need it. It doesn't matter if you don't need it.
It still could come into play, and it still is really good to have in your back pocket, right? But ultimately, yeah.
Unless you tie it up, it doesn't matter.
Exactly. Let's wrap it up here. We'll go kind of around the table. If you could, Amna, magically correct one problem for the Falcons at this point for the final 4 games, and it's fixed, what would that be?
Kirk. It's easy. What you had listed a few options out here. A few of them, turnovers, Kirk, red zone. If those all go into the Kirk umbrella, so that is easily the one that I think. And we say it a lot, like this team will go as far as Kirk Cousins will go. So that's mine.
Yeah, I fully agree with Amna. It's a quarterback league, right? If you don't have a great quarterback, you don't have a great team. And I think you've seen that the last 4 weeks, right? No touchdowns, 8 interceptions. And then if you look at the 3 weeks before those 4 weeks, he had a completion rate of 76% for 730 yards, 8 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. So when Kirk is rocking and rolling, the whole team is, right? So I think if I could snap my fingers magically and change anything, and I think Kirk Cousins would say the same thing. If I could snap my fingers and change anything about this team, it'd probably be me. So I think if Kirk can get on the right path again, if he can get things rolling again, I think it'll be it won't be as much of a dogfight as we were just talking about getting to the playoffs.
Yeah, that'll be 3 for 3. It's for me as well. And I think it is so interesting because like the importance of the quarterback position is the reason Kirk is here in the first place, right?
Exactly. Which is the parallelism is
it's ironic a little bit, right? Because the reason Raheem is here is because of the quarterback position. He said so in his introductory press conference, and they knew they needed to get better quarterback play. And it's unfortunate that kind of at the pivotal stretch of the season, that has faltered a little bit. But I do think that for all of the fans, and it is funny thinking back, it's like when they were winning those games, right? And yeah, the pass rush wasn't necessarily working, but there were a lot of things to like, specifically about the offense. Everybody was doom and gloom about the pass rush. And now in hindsight, it's like, cool, you got that pass rush you were looking for, but wouldn't you rather have a win to go along with it? So I've always taken the approach, a win is a win is a win, right? It doesn't matter how you get there. You can still nitpick and try to clean up some of those issues, but just get the win. And I would much rather have 0 sacks today and a W in that win-loss column, right? So I think that when your quarterback is the one struggling, it's just so hard to overcome. You can overcome a bad pass rush. You can overcome even a couple of turnovers, right? A bad ground game, things like that. But it's just so hard when you don't get that quarterback play.
Yeah, and I think Kirk is also just like known for his leadership. So when I'm not saying that he's not a good leader anymore. I think he's a great leader, but I think when he's off, everyone else is off, right?
It's hard when your leader is the one that's kind of,
Yes, and I think too, like there's a lot of pressure on Kirk right now. When Raheem Morris first brought him in, he said, we brought Kirk Cousins in here to do what? take us to a playoff.
Yep.
And now the pressure is on. You got 4 games left. You're a game behind Tampa Bay. You got to get to a playoff because that's what they're paying you to do here. That's why they drafted Michael Penix 8th overall, because they're not going to be in the position again to get a quarterback at that high of a draft stock. So I think now for Kirk Cousins, it's almost in a way do or die.
Yeah, the pressure is on, and I think that's a great way to leave it after this one. Unfortunately, again, Falcons fall 42-21. The score looks kind of way worse than this game actually was, but at the end of the day, like, that's what it is. And the Falcons, when you're looking at turnovers, when you're looking at red zone, when you're looking at penalties,
got to get it all working together, you know?
That is the difference between kind of being a team like the Vikings, and that's where the Falcons want to be. Raheem Morris said, you look at a model like the Lions and how they built things. That is the goal. That's the vision. That's where they want to be.
Yeah.
And those teams don't make these mistakes.
Got to bite the kneecaps, you know?
Yeah, got to go bite those kneecaps.
The other kneecap.
Vikings have some kneecaps that they weren't bitten today. All right, that will do it for us. Thank you guys so much for listening, for following along all throughout the season. Please keep an eye out on the feed. We'll have Falcons Audible coming midweek, and then we'll have Falcons in Focus and a preview show for the Las Vegas Raiders coming on Friday. For Amna Subhan and Taylor Vismor, I'm Will McFadden. We will see you all next time.